Listen carefully. Every time you think this must happen, or they should do this, or I have to succeed, you're setting yourself up to lose your peace. And you do it dozens of times a day without even noticing. This one thinking pattern creates more suffering than almost anything else in human psychology. I'm Albert Ellis, and I'm going to show you exactly how to break free from it. Here's what we're going to do together. I'm going to show you the exact thought pattern that's robbing you of peace. Not some vague idea. The specific words and beliefs that create your suffering. And I'm going to prove it to you using your own life. You've probably tried positive thinking. You've tried meditation. You've tried changing your circumstances. And sometimes you feel better for a while. But then that familiar anxiety comes back. That frustration. That feeling that life just isn't working the way it should. That's because you've been treating the symptoms, not the cause. The cause is something I call masturbation, and no, I'm not joking about the name. It's when you take your preferences and turn them into absolute demands. When you escalate, I want this into I must have this. When you turn I prefer that into that absolutely should happen. By the end of this video, you'll be able to catch yourself doing this in real time. You'll understand why it creates so much suffering. And you'll have a practical system for changing these thoughts immediately. This isn't about becoming some Zen master. It's about stopping the one thing that's making everything harder than it needs to be. So let me start by showing you how you torture yourself without even knowing it. Right now, your mind is making demands. Absolute demands about how things must be. And every single time reality doesn't meet those demands, you suffer. It's that simple. It's that predictable. And it's completely unnecessary. I spent over 50 years working with people, and I found three major musts that show up in almost everyone. The first one is I must perform well and be approved by significant others. The second is other people must treat me fairly and kindly. And the third is conditions must be favorable and comfortable. These are the big three, and I guarantee you're running at least one of them right now. Let's break down the first one. You wake up in the morning and you think, I must do well at work today. I must get this right. I must not make mistakes. Now, wanting to do well, that's fine. That's healthy. But the moment you tell yourself you must, you've created a trap. Because what happens when you don't do perfectly? What happens when your boss criticizes you or your presentation doesn't go as planned? You don't just feel disappointed. You feel devastated. You feel worthless. You feel like a complete failure. And here's the thing. The criticism might be valid. The presentation might have actually had problems. But your suffering isn't coming from those facts. It's coming from your belief that you absolutely must perform perfectly and that anything less is catastrophic. Now, let's look at the second must. Other people must treat me fairly and kindly. You're driving to work and someone cuts you off in traffic. What happens? You explode with rage. Why? Because you're telling yourself they shouldn't have done that. They must not drive that way. They have to be more considerate. Or maybe your friend doesn't text you back for 3 hours, and you start spiraling. They should have responded by now. They must not care about me. They have to value our friendship more than this. And now you're anxious and hurt, not because of what actually happened, which is just a delayed text message, but because of your demand that they must behave a certain way. The third must is about your conditions. The weather must be nice. Traffic must be light. Your coffee must be made correctly. Your internet must work perfectly. The person in front of you in line must move faster. And every single time these conditions aren't met, you get irritated, frustrated, or worse. Now here's what I want you to understand. These demands feel like they're helping you. They feel like they're motivating you or protecting you. But they're not. They're destroying your peace. Because you're essentially telling the universe how it must operate. And the universe doesn't care about your demands. Let me show you how this escalation happens. You start with a healthy preference. I like this promotion. That's normal. That's human. You want good things. Nothing wrong with that. But then you start thinking about it more. I really want this promotion. Still okay. You're passionate about it. But then something shifts. I need this promotion. And then finally, I must get this promotion or I'm worthless. I have to succeed or my life is a failure. See what happened? You went from a preference to an absolute demand. And in doing so, you created massive vulnerability. Because now your entire self-worth is riding on one outcome. One thing you don't fully control. And if you don't get it, you've set yourself up to be emotionally devastated. Here's the formula for suffering. It's really simple. Demand plus reality, not meeting that demand equals emotional disturbance. That's it. And notice what's missing from that formula. It's not the event that upsets you. It's your belief about the event. Let me introduce you to something I developed called the ABC model. This is the core of understanding your own mind. A stands for activating event. That's what actually happened. Just the facts. No interpretation. B stands for belief. That's what you told yourself about what happened. Your interpretation. Your demands. And C stands for consequence. That's how you felt and what you did as a result. Most people think a cause is C. They think the event causes their feelings. Someone criticizes them, and they think the criticism made them feel bad. But that's not true. It's B that causes C. It's your belief about the criticism that makes you feel bad. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we turn preferences into demands? Well, partly it's evolution. Our brains develop shortcuts to help us survive. If you're running from a predator, you need quick, absolute thinking. Danger equals bad. Safety equals good. No nuance required. But we're not running from predators anymore. We're dealing with complex social situations, work challenges, relationship dynamics. And those absolute thinking patterns that helped us survive now make us miserable. Also, culture teaches us this demanding language. Think about how often you hear people say you should do this, or you have to do that, or you must succeed. It's everywhere. We're taught from childhood to think in musts and shoulds. So it becomes automatic. And there's another reason. Demanding gives us the illusion of control. If you tell yourself something must happen, it feels like you're making it more likely to happen. Like your demand has some power over reality. But it doesn't. All it does is set you up for suffering when reality doesn't comply. Now, you might be thinking, but Albert, some things really are musts. I must pay my rent. I must feed my kids. And you're right, sort of. But you're confusing practical necessity with emotional demand. Let me show you the difference because this is where most people get stuck. A practical must is conditional. It's strategic. If I want to keep my apartment, I must pay rent. If I want to keep my job, I must show up on time. These are cause and effect relationships. They're about understanding reality and acting accordingly. And they don't create emotional disturbance because they're not absolute demands about how the universe should be. An emotional must is absolute. It's a demand on reality itself. I must keep this job or I'm a complete failure. I must have a romantic partner or I'm unlovable. I must succeed at everything or I'm worthless. See the difference? The first kind is practical. The second kind is destructive. Here's how to tell them apart. Listen to your own language. When you say must or should or have to or need to or ought to, ask yourself, is this a preference or a demand? Is this conditional or absolute? Does this make me feel pressured and anxious? Or does it help me make good decisions? Let me give you some examples. If you say, I must do well at this presentation, and you feel anxious and pressured, that's an emotional demand. If you say, I strongly prefer to do well at this presentation, and I'll prepare thoroughly because I want a good outcome, that's a rational preference. The preference might motivate you just as much or even more, but it doesn't create the same suffering. Here's something important. You can want something intensely. You can work incredibly hard for it. You can be very disappointed if you don't get it. All of that is fine. That's being human. The problem isn't the wanting. It's the demanding. It's when you tell yourself that you absolutely must have it. And if you don't, it's awful and terrible and the end of the world. Which brings me to another destructive thinking pattern called awfulizing. This is when you take something bad and you escalate it in your mind to awful, terrible, catastrophic, the worst thing that could ever happen. Your boss criticizes your work. That's bad. You prefer it didn't happen. But then you tell yourself, this is awful. This is terrible. This is a complete disaster. And now you've taken a small setback and turned it into a catastrophe in your own mind. Here's the thing about the word awful. When you really think about it, awful means nothing could be worse. It means the worst possible thing. Is your boss's criticism really the worst possible thing? Is a delayed text message the worst possible thing? Is bad weather the worst possible thing? Of course not. They're unfortunate. They're frustrating. They're things you'd prefer didn't happen. but they're not awful. And this matters because the language you use shapes how you feel. When you call something awful, you feel awful. When you call something unfortunate or frustrating or annoying, you feel those emotions instead. And those are much easier to handle. So now you understand the difference between demands and preferences. But here's what you're probably wondering. How do I actually catch myself doing this? How do I notice these demands in the moment? That's exactly what we're going to tackle next, because awareness without a system is useless. Let me teach you the complete ABC model, including the parts that actually change your life. We already talked about the activating event, B, your belief about it, and C, the consequence. But there are two more letters, D for disputation and E for effective new belief. These are the game changers. Let me walk you through this with a real example. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. That's A, the activating event. Just the fact. A car changed lanes suddenly in front of you. Now, what's your belief? If you're thinking irrationally, it's something like they must not do that. They should be more careful. They have to be more considerate. They're a terrible person. That's B, your irrational belief. What's the consequence? C is rage. Your heart's pounding. You're yelling. Maybe you're driving aggressively. You're furious. And you might stay angry for the next 20 minutes or even hours. You get to work in a bad mood. You snap at someone, all because of one car changing lanes. But here's what happens if you have a rational belief instead. The same A happens. Car changes lanes, but your B is different. You think, I'd prefer they didn't do that. That's annoying. Maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're having an emergency. Or maybe they're just a careless driver. Oh well, that's a rational belief. And your C is completely different. You feel mildly irritated for about 10 seconds. Then you move on. You get to work in a normal mood. Your whole day isn't affected. Same event, completely different outcome. And the only difference is B, your belief. Now here's where it gets powerful. Let's say you notice yourself having the irrational belief and the rage. What do? You use D, disputation. You question your belief. You challenge it. You ask yourself, where's the evidence that they must not do that? Who made that rule? Where is it written in the laws of the universe that people must always drive considerately? And the answer is nowhere. You prefer it. You wish it, but there's no must about it. You ask, is this belief helping me or hurting me? Is being enraged making my drive better or worse? Is it making me a better driver or a more dangerous one? Obviously, it's hurting. You ask, does my conclusion actually follow logically? Does someone cutting me off prove they're a terrible person? Does it prove they don't care about anyone? Or does it just prove they made one inconsiderate driving decision? The logic doesn't hold up. And then you get to E, your effective new belief. This isn't positive thinking. It's not pretending you like being cut off. It's realistic acknowledgement. You think, I don't like that. It was inconsiderate and potentially dangerous. I prefer people drive more carefully. But there's no law that says they must. People make mistakes. People are sometimes careless. That's reality. I can handle a bit of annoyance. And with that new belief, your consequence changes. You feel appropriately frustrated for a moment, then you let it go. You stay in control. You drive safely. You arrive at work in a good mood. Let me give you another example. You send someone a text message and they don't respond for 3 hours. That's A. What's your irrational B? They should respond immediately. They must value me enough to text back right away. The fact that they didn't means they don't care about me. I need their approval and attention. C is anxiety and hurt. You're checking your phone constantly. You're ruminating. You're imagining they hate you. You're feeling rejected and worthless. 3 hours of suffering. Now let's dispute that. D. Where's the evidence they should respond immediately? Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're in a meeting. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they're thinking about their response. Is this belief helping you? No, it's making you miserable. Does 3 hours of no response actually prove they don't care? Of course not. That's a huge leap. E. Effective new belief. I like a response. It would be nice to hear back. But they're probably just busy. They have their own life. A delayed response doesn't mean anything about my worth or their feelings. I can handle waiting. I can even follow up later if needed. And now your C is mild curiosity instead of anxiety. You go about your day. When they respond, great. If they don't, you'll deal with it then. Either way, You're not suffering for hours over something you can't control. This is the system. ABC, then D, then E. And you can use it for anything, any emotional disturbance. Anytime you're feeling anxious, angry, depressed, or hurt in a way that seems out of proportion to what actually happened. Here's what you do. First, identify the activating event. What actually happened? Just the facts. No interpretation. Then, identify your belief. What did you tell yourself about it? What demand are you making? Then notice the consequence. How do you feel? What are you doing? Then dispute it. Question your belief. Is there evidence for this must? Is this helping me? Is this logical? Is this realistic? And finally, create an effective new belief. Not denial, not fake positivity, just a rational, realistic, flexible way of looking at the situation. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Albert, this sounds like you're telling me not to care about anything. Like I should just accept everything and become some passive doormat. And that's exactly the opposite of what I'm saying. Let me explain why this actually makes you more powerful, not less. Here's the paradox. Demanding doesn't give you control. It gives you the illusion of control. When you demand something and you don't get it, you're powerless and upset. You're suffering and you're no closer to what you want. But when you prefer something and you don't get it, you're disappointed but functional. You can think clearly. You can take effective action. You can try again. You can adapt. Real power isn't in controlling outcomes. You can't control outcomes. You can't control other people. You can't control the universe. Real power is in your response. And when you're not emotionally devastated by every setback, you respond better. You think more clearly. You persist more effectively. Let me give you an example from performance. Athletes who demand they must win, they must play perfectly, they must not make mistakes. What happens to them? They choke. They get performance anxiety. The pressure crushes them. But athletes who strongly prefer to win, who want it intensely, but who accept that they might not, what happens to them? They play loose. They flow. They perform at their best. Same thing with public speaking. If you demand you must give a perfect speech, you'll be terrified. You'll stumble. You'll be so focused on not messing up that you actually mess up. But if you prefer to give a good speech, you accept that you might make a mistake or two. You're not perfect, and that's okay. You'll actually speak better. You'll be more natural, more confident, more effective. This applies to everything. Job interviews, creative work, relationships, difficult conversations. Anytime you demand perfection, you create anxiety. And anxiety hurts performance. When you prefer success but accept possible failure, you free yourself to actually succeed. Now, let me talk about something crucial. Unconditional self-acceptance. This is different from self-esteem. Self-esteem is conditional. It goes up and down based on how well you're doing, what people think of you, what you achieve. When things go well, you feel good about yourself. When things go badly, you feel worthless. But unconditional self-acceptance means you accept yourself as a fallible human being regardless of what happens. You are not your performance. You are not your achievements. You are not other people's opinions of you. You're a human being who sometimes succeeds and sometimes doesn't. Sometimes does well and sometimes screws up. And that's okay. That doesn't change your fundamental worth as a person. Because here's the truth. You don't have worth in some cosmic sense anyway. You just are. You exist. You're alive. And you can choose to accept yourself unconditionally, or you can choose to rate yourself based on your performance and live on an emotional roller coaster forever. I'm not saying you can't evaluate your behavior. You absolutely should. You could say, I did that badly. I want to improve. I made a mistake. I'll do better next time. That's healthy. That's growth. But you don't have to then conclude, and therefore I'm a bad person. Therefore I'm worthless. That doesn't follow. Unconditional self-acceptance means you can fail at something and still accept yourself. You can be criticized and still accept yourself. You can be rejected and still accept yourself. Because those things are about specific performances or other people's preferences, not about your fundamental value as a human. And when you have unconditional self-acceptance, you become much more resilient. Setbacks hurt less. Criticism is easier to hear. Rejection is disappointing, but not devastating. You can take risks because failure won't destroy you. Now, you can still work hard. You can still pursue goals. You can still set boundaries and stand up for yourself. The difference is your internal state while you're doing it. You're coming from a place of preference, not desperation. You want good outcomes, but you don't need them to prove you're okay. Let me give you a practical example. Let's say you're asking for a raise at work. If you're demanding it, if you're thinking I must get this raise, or I'm a failure, my boss must recognize my value, they have to say yes. What's your energy like? You're needy. You're desperate. You're tense. And your boss can feel it. And that actually makes you less likely to get the raise. But if you're coming from preference, if you're thinking I'd really like this raise, I think I deserve it, I'm going to make a strong case. And if they say no, I'll be disappointed, but I'll figure out my next step. What's your energy like then? You're confident. You're clear. You're calm. And you're more persuasive. You're more likely to get what you want. This is strategic action versus emotional demand. You can pursue things forcefully, persistently, passionately, but from a place of preference. And that's actually more effective than pursuing them from desperation and demand. So you're starting to see how this works. But here's the thing. Knowing this intellectually isn't enough. Your brain has practiced these demanding thoughts for years, maybe decades. They're like deep grooves in your mind. They're automatic. So how do you actually rewire this? How do you make rational thinking automatic? That's what I'm going to show you now. First thing you need to do is a daily belief audit. Every morning, take 2 minutes and ask yourself, where am I likely to make demands today? Maybe you have a meeting and you're thinking, I must impress everyone. Maybe you're seeing family and you're thinking they must not criticize me. Just identify one area where you're demanding. Then every evening, review your day. What triggered you? What upset you? When you felt anxious or angry or depressed, what happened right before? What was your belief? What were you demanding? And how could you reframe it? Write this down. Don't just think about it. Writing activates different brain pathways. It makes it more real. It helps you see patterns. And over time, you'll notice you keep making the same demands over and over. Maybe you always demand approval. Maybe you always demand fairness. Maybe you always demand certainty. Once you see the pattern, you can work on it. Second technique, forceful disputation. When you notice an irrational belief, don't whisper your rational alternative. Shout it. I mean this literally if you're alone, or internally if you're around people. Where is it written that he must treat me well? Who says I have to succeed at this? Prove to me that this is awful rather than just unfortunate. Use emotion to install new beliefs. Your irrational beliefs have emotion behind them. So your rational beliefs need emotion too. Be forceful. Be vigorous. Argue with your own irrational thoughts like you're in a debate. Third, and this is crucial, there's a behavioral component. This is rational emotive behavior therapy. Behavior matters. You can't just think your way out of irrational beliefs. You have to practice acting on your rational beliefs. What does this mean? If you're demanding you must succeed at public speaking, you need to go do public speaking and accept the possibility of failure. If you're demanding people must approve of you, you need to practice doing things people might disapprove of. If you're demanding you must never be uncomfortable, you need to deliberately make yourself uncomfortable. I used to give people what I called shame-attacking exercises. I tell them to do something embarrassing in public on purpose. Ride the subway and announce the stops yourself. Wear mismatched clothes. Ask for something ridiculous in a store. The point isn't to humiliate yourself. The point is to prove to yourself that you can handle disapproval. You can handle looking foolish. You can survive embarrassment. And when you prove that to yourself through behavior, your demands start to weaken. Fourth technique, language shift. Start catching yourself mid-sentence. You're about to say, I must do this, and you stop yourself and say, wait, I strongly prefer to do this. You notice yourself thinking they should act differently, and you correct it to I wish they'd act differently. At first, this will feel awkward. It'll feel forced. That's fine. You're installing a new habit. But over time, preference language will start to feel natural. And as your language changes, your beliefs change. And as your beliefs change, your emotions change. Fifth technique, the catastrophe scale. When something bad happens, rate it on a scale from 1 to 100. 1 is a minor inconvenience. 100 is reserved for truly catastrophic events. Death of a loved one. Severe trauma. Genuine tragedy. Now, when your coffee order is wrong, what is that? Maybe a 3. When someone criticizes your work, maybe a 15 to 30, depending on the specifics. When you don't get a job you wanted, maybe a 40. Notice how most things we call terrible or awful are actually under 50. And this creates appropriate emotional proportion. When you rate something as a 10 and respond with 10 level emotions, you're being proportionate. When you rate something as a 10 but respond with 90 level emotions, you're awfulizing. You're making it worse than it is. And that creates unnecessary suffering. Now I want to address something important, because you might be worried that if you stop demanding things, you'll become passive, you'll stop caring, you'll let people walk all over you. And I need to tell you why that's completely wrong. Here's what you keep when you move from demands to preferences. You keep your values and principles. You keep your goals and ambitions. You keep your desire for good outcomes. You keep your ability to be disappointed, sad, or frustrated when things don't go your way. You keep your capacity to work hard and persist. You keep your standards for yourself and others. What do you lose? You lose the constant underlying anxiety. You lose the rage when things don't go your way. You lose the depression when you fail. You lose the need for everyone's approval. You lose the fragility of conditional self-worth. You lose the suffering on top of the pain. Because here's the thing. Life will bring you pain. That's unavoidable. Disappointments happen. Losses happen. Failures happen. People die. Relationships end. Plans fall through. That's life. And when those things happen, you'll feel sad or frustrated or disappointed. That's appropriate. That's human. That's pain. But suffering is what you add on top with your demands. It's not just that I lost my job. It's I must not lose my job. This is awful. I'm worthless. My life is ruined. That extra layer, that's suffering. And that's optional. That comes from your beliefs, not from reality. So let me paint you a picture of what life actually looks like when you operate from strong preferences instead of rigid demands. Let's look at some real scenarios. Relationship conflict. Your partner does something that bothers you. Demanding mindset says they must not do that. They should know better. They have to change. This is terrible. You're devastated. You're furious. You can't let it go. Preference mindset says, I really don't like that. I wish they wouldn't do it. I'm going to talk to them about it. You're disappointed. You're frustrated. But you can communicate. You can problem solve. You're not emotionally hijacked. Work setback. You don't get the promotion. Demanding mindset says, I must have gotten this. I deserved it. This is awful. I'm a failure. You're despairing. You can barely function. You might quit in anger or give up on your career. Preference mindset says, I really wanted this. I'm very disappointed. This is frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. I'll ask for feedback. I'll figure out what to work on. I'll try again or look for other opportunities. You're sad, but you're functional. You can move forward. Social rejection. You ask someone out and they say no. Demanding mindset says they must like me. They should give me a chance. I need someone to want me, or I'm unlovable. You're devastated. You feel worthless. You might stop trying altogether. Preference mindset says, I wish they'd said yes. I'm disappointed. That's uncomfortable, but it's one person's preference. It doesn't define my worth. You're sad, but you can handle it. You can try again with someone else. Life uncertainty. You don't know if you'll get into the school you want, or if your job is secure, or if your health issue is serious. Demanding mindset says, I must know. I have to have certainty. I can't stand not knowing. This is terrible. You're terrified. You're paralyzed. You can't function. Preference mindset says, I'd really like to know. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, but I can handle it. I'll deal with whatever happens when it happens. You're concerned. You're watchful, but you can still live your life. See the difference? In every case, you're still responding to reality. You're still having emotions. You're still caring about outcomes. But you're not emotionally destroyed because you're not demanding reality be different than it is. And here's the key. When you're not emotionally destroyed, you respond more effectively. You think more clearly. You communicate better. You make better decisions. You persist more intelligently. You adapt to changing circumstances. It's like flexibility. When you prefer, you can adapt to reality. When you demand, you're at war with what is. And you can't win that war. Reality always wins. But you can exhaust yourself trying. Or you can adapt. And adaptation is survival. Rigidity is fragility. Think of a bamboo tree versus an oak tree. When a storm comes, the oak tree stands rigid. It demands the storm not bend it. And if the storm is strong enough, it breaks. The bamboo bends with the wind. It flexes. It adapts. And it survives. That's the advantage of preference over demand. You become anti-fragile. Setbacks don't break you. They teach you. Challenges don't destroy you. They strengthen you. Because you're flexible. You can handle what comes. So here's where we are. You now understand the thought that's been ruining your peace. You know why you do it. You know the difference between demands and preferences. You've got the ABC model with disputation and effective new beliefs. You got specific practices to rewire your thinking. The daily audit, forceful disputation, behavioral exercises, language shifts, the catastrophe scale. But before you go, I need to leave you with one final thing. This is not something you do once and you're done. This is a practice. Your brain will keep trying to make demands. That's what's been trained to do. So you have to keep catching it. Keep disputing. Keep practicing rational beliefs. Some days you'll do great. You'll catch your demands quickly. You'll reframe them. You'll stay calm and rational. Other days you'll forget everything I've told you and you'll demand and awfulize and make yourself miserable. That's normal. That's being human. When that happens, you don't demand that you must always be rational. You just notice, oh, I did it again, and you get back to practicing. Here's your challenge for the next 24 hours. I want you to catch yourself using the word must or should. Just notice it. Don't even try to change it yet. Just become aware. Count how many times you do it. Write it down. Then ask yourself with each one, is this a practical must or an emotional demand? Is this conditional or absolute? Is this a preference or a demand? Just notice. Just become aware. Because you can't change what you don't see. And remember this. You're a fallible human being. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need everyone's approval. You don't need life to be fair. You can handle what comes. You always have. Every challenge you've faced, you've survived. Every setback you've experienced, you've gotten through. You're stronger than you think. The suffering isn't coming from life. It's coming from your demands about life. Change the demands. Change the suffering. Keep the preferences. Keep the passion. Keep the goals. Keep the values. Just drop the absolute musts. And watch how much lighter you feel. Now, if you found this helpful, there's something else you need to understand. Because changing your musts is powerful, but there's another thinking pattern that's just as destructive, and most people don't even know they're doing it. It's called awfulizing, and it's how your brain takes normal problems and turns them into catastrophes. It's why a small criticism feels like a character assassination. Why a mistake feels like proof you're incompetent. Why one bad day feels like your whole life is falling apart. In my next video, I'm going to show you exactly how to stop awfulizing, how to keep your emotions proportionate to reality, how to handle genuinely bad situations without making them worse in your own mind. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now. It's called Why Your Brain Makes Everything Worse Than It Is. And I promise you it's going to change how you experience everything that happens to you.